I'm Sarah, like he said. I'm from Kansas City by way of Iowa. And I grew up in a land of very simple feedback loops. Maybe you've experienced some of these yourself. This is the farm feedback loop. This school feedback loop is a really simple one. Even the movies I grew up loving had very simple feedback loops. I came here to Columbia to study journalism. That same school loop applied. I was also in a band while I was here right before social media got really big, so that still had a very simple feedback loop. And when people didn't buy CDs, which they most often didn't, I also freelanced a little bit. That had a simple feedback loop too. But then things changed. I graduated. I was a long way from the farm. Those Star Wars prequels are really dismal. The band broke up. I got really burnt out on pitching, and I landed at dun, 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 a big corporation. It's a nice corporation, though. It's one where we sit around and talk about our feelings all day long, preferably with puppies present. This is Golden Retriever Day at my office. But I noticed that the feedback loops were not so simple anymore. There were a lot of them. They were sometimes confusing, complex, and a few of them actually seemed a little bit broken. Has this ever happened to you? Have you ever been somewhere new and been really confused about what was going on? Have you tried to make your way through a corporate maze? Or maybe had a perplexing situation with a friend where you were talking or not talking in circles? Well, I don't know much, but one thing that I've learned so far in life is that broken social feedback loops can be changed. They're fixable, they're malleable, and they're redeemable, which is good because broken feedback loops happen everywhere in life. They happen in work, they happen in our creative pursuits, and they happen also in our personal life. So to end the day today, I'm going to give you 4 tools that I found really helpful in fixing broken loops: linking, widening, separating, and asking. But before we get to these tools, let's look at what some broken social loops can look like. I'm going to give you some examples, and they're based on a new person's perspective in a big organization. And that's not because I think all broken social feedback loops happen in big organizations. It's just that in my experience, they start to happen with a little bit more frequency. Not because corporations are evil. The one I work for has a lot of really empathetic, kind people. But because with size comes complexity. And when you have a lot of people who have different goals and different vocabularies and different deadlines running around and bumping into each other, things get a little screwy. So here's a couple examples of the screwiness. This is the classic broken social loop, the pass the buck social loop. This is the passive, maybe passive-aggressive broken social loop. How about the fear of change social loop? There's also the cynical broken social loop. And this one's my favorite. This one can happen to you whether you're old or young. If you're new to an organization, this is the rookie social loop. It's bad. But like I said, not all broken loops happen in big organizations. They can also happen in an organization of one. This is the tortured artist broken loop, and we'll get back to this one really soon, I promise. The worst thing about broken feedback loops is not that they make our work life harder or our personal life messy, it's that they can kill really great things. Whether that's a new invention that can save lives, or a new product that can make a lot of people happy, broken loops get in the way of those really great things. So let's start talking about the tools that can get us back to those really great things and get them back on track. Let's go back to that pass the buck feedback loop. This one is if you are hearing feedback that sounds like, oh, it's not really my area, or I'm not really the person to talk to. You might not only be in a broken loop, you might be in the wrong loop. But fortunately, there's a magic phrase that can fix this really easily, and it's this: whom should I talk to next? And if you don't want to sound like an English major, you can also say who. No one will fault you. Who should I talk to next? When I started at Hallmark, I was also doing some volunteer work for groups that were fighting extreme poverty and stopping the spread of AIDS. So like any really enthusiastic new employee, I wanted to get a product line started that would help give money back to organizations that were similar. But I was at the very, very bottom of the hierarchy, and I had no power and no influence to get something that big started. But fortunately, I did have one thing, and that was a really great boss. And he taught me the power of linking, of asking, who should I talk to next? So I did. Every time I brought up this idea, I asked, who should I talk to next? Who should I talk to next? And he did as well. And eventually, he even got me on a team that was tasked with coming up with new product line ideas, and link after link after link, we got to Hallmark Product Red. We teamed up with the Product Red folks to make a card line and gift line that gave money back to the Global Fund to fight AIDS, TB, and malaria. And that's the power of the link. We ended up giving, while it existed, a lot of money back to the Global Fund. We helped the West African country of Mali complete the largest export, handcrafted export that they'd ever done. And Bono came and sang to us in a business meeting. And that's what can happen when you link. You can move from feedback that is not getting you anywhere to feedback that gets you one step closer to that great thing you're trying to get done. But what happens if your broken loop is not with other people, but with yourself? Let's go back to that tortured artist feedback loop. This one is tricky, but it also has a very similar, very easy way to fix, and it's we need a bigger loop. We need to widen. We need to get more ideas, more data, and possibly more people into our loop. This is a great solution for loner creative weirdos like myself, even though it forces us to break out of our hermit habits. Let me tell you how this has worked for me. When I'm not writing greeting cards, I like to write screenplays, but I'm still pretty new at it and not very good yet. And so when I'm writing, a lot of times I can vacillate between thinking, this is the next Casablanca, to no one should ever, ever see this. I should delete it right now. And neither of those responses is really helpful for creative growth. So what I've learned to do is every time I finish a draft, I send it to a group of my friends who are also writers, and then I make them come over for dinner in 2 weeks. I bribe them with lots of food and lots of alcohol, and they all give me my feedback all at once. Getting the feedback in a group setting like that is really helpful to me because I can weigh everybody's opinions all at one time. So if everybody is saying that plot point is unbelievable, it is probably unbelievable. But if they're arguing, then I get to weigh all their opinions and then make a decision later. But the key to widening is to make sure that the people you're inviting into your bigger loop are in a reciprocal relationship with it. So we need to make sure that they're getting as much out of it as we are. In this case, I'm inviting people that I'll get to pay back later with feedback, and I'm also giving them said booze and food. So it's been working out really well. It's getting me from that creative death spiral to feedback that really is helping my ideas get better. So we've talked about linking, we've talked about widening. Let's go back to problems where if you're not getting any conversation at all, or if you're getting the rookie loop where you're not being taken seriously. This also has a very simple solution, and it's to make your own damn loop. This might, I hear some applauding, so over here needs to make your own damn loop. You might think that this is cheating, that this is replacing a loop instead of changing a loop. But hear me out. When I'm talking about separating, it's not to banish the unhelpful feedback givers out of your life forever. It's to make a new loop that's so powerful and so productive and so positive that those people want to come back in later. And I've seen this work. I'm not the only person at Hallmark who is excited about script writing. A bunch of the writers got really into short films a few years ago. But we couldn't get a lot of other people to talk to us about it. It wasn't that anybody was saying no short films at Hallmark. It was just that nobody had really cast a vision for what they could do to help the company. So being writers, there's not that much of us, and we're kind of quiet, so we can do things without anybody noticing. We started a short film boot camp. And we got a bunch of people together. We invited other people from the creative division to work on this with us if they could do it without getting in trouble with their managers. And we made a whole bunch of movies together. We learned a lot, we had a lot of fun, and we had a screening. And people invited their managers to this screening, and enough managers were impressed by what we could do with no budget and not a lot of time that we got to do it a second year. And more people showed up, we had more fun, we made more movies, and then a couple senior leaders started to creep in and kind of look around and see what was going on. We had another screening, we impressed more managers. And so this year, the boot camp program is now an official project. It's an official development project, which means that every creative employee at Hallmark has permission to make movies on their 9-to-5 time. And they're actually funding boot camp teams, which means we get to do crazy things like pay our actors. And so the separation of creating our own little loop on our own really worked for us. It got us from a place where we weren't having conversations we wanted to have to a place where people were coming to us and asking, how can we join in and make this better? So we've talked about linking, we've talked about widening and separating. So we're down to the last tool. And the last tool is the most guaranteed way to fix a broken loop. It's also the scariest. It's asking. Now, if you're scared of having a direct conversation about a broken loop, one of my writing managers, Deborah, gave me a really easy trick to use. And that's when you're getting unhelpful feedback, maybe like this, you give that person 3 interpretations of how you could take what they're telling you. You can say, okay, are you saying it will never work because it's already been tried and it failed that time? Or are you saying it will never work because it's too expensive? Or maybe is it because I'm the one proposing it and I'm just not ready yet? As Deborah says, this compels the person giving the feedback to choose one of these options, to tell you one of these is right, or to correct you and give you a clear feedback that's something else. Either way, you're going to get more clear feedback and you're on your way to getting that loop fixed. Asking is the name of the game. As a Hallmark writer, we work with a lot of editors, a lot of product teams, and oftentimes, especially when those relationships are new, we don't have an established vocabulary yet, so I don't know what the editor is asking for. This is real copy I got one day. Copy needs to have more Scooby voice. It's a Scooby-Doo card, and so this is when I need to start asking. Does that mean there need to be more Ruh-Rohs? Does it mean more talk about Scooby snacks? Or are you talking about Scooby-Doo the show, not the dog? And if you're talking about the show, are you talking about the old show or the new show? These are all questions that I have to ask so I can get the editor copy that she needs, that our consumers will love, instead of copy that's going to be right into the recycling bin. Of course, the scariest part about asking is not even having these direct conversations. It's that there's a chance I might find out that there's something about that loop I didn't know that I'm not going to like looking at. What if that passive loop that we looked at before, what if this wasn't exactly how it went down? What if instead I insulted you in the way that I shared my idea, and what I was taking as passivity was actually mercy and not pointing out what a terrible person I was being? That's the kind of thing that can happen when we ask, and it's scary, but if we face it, it means that we can take responsibility for the loops, the brokenness in the loops that we've caused ourselves, and we can also commit to changing them. And that's what can happen if we're okay with taking on that challenge. We can get from feedback that's not helpful, or maybe it's unclear or vague, to feedback that's collaborative and clear and creative. So I just have a few more questions for you today. Do you have a problem at work that you're stuck on? Are you at odds with a friend? Are you in the throes of your own creative death spiral? Is there a loop that you want to change? I know I have a couple. So let's link, let's widen, let's separate, and let's ask, because we have a lot of really great things to accomplish together. Thank you for your time today.